Hi folks, back here with part 3 from chapter 5. So, turn this on here, a little draw thing. So, what happens when employees try to get company checks, right? So, by the way, nowadays a lot happens with ACH and drafts, so it's not like it used to be, but there are still a number of companies that have, you've probably seen it before, those checks that come like 3 up on a sheet. So first you got to have access to them. If they don't, they got to figure out some other way. Now, you can produce counterfeit checks, but it's kind of hard. You have to have a special toner. It's called a microtoner. That's, for the numbers along the bottom of the check to be read. So I guess somebody could do that. But basically the key here, obviously, like everything else, is internal controls, right? So this is the key right here. Blank check should be locked and strictly limited. Got to have authorization. Watermark paper, that's obviously a special type of paper. Always checking your sequence numbers, things like this, okay? So, by the way, how would they do this? They can make it payable to themselves, which I have to tell you, that's pretty crazy. To an accomplice, which is crazy for them. To cash, payable to a vendor. Usually creating a vendor and sending it around that way is the way a lot of folks do this, okay? Now, how do you get the signature? Well, you can do freehand forgery. I've seen people do it that are very good. You can get photocop forgeries. They actually have check signing instruments. I'm sure you've seen the checks where it's like got this stamp looking thing on it. So it's definitely possible to do. Let's see. So what can you do? When you have these schemes that people are trying to do here, what can you do about it? Dealing with these schemes. Okay. So again, procedures, again, another internal controls. This is all here. Let's switch over here to the pen. This is all about controls. Okay. So rotate authorized signature. This is control. Restrictive list, control. Verify signatures, control. Okay. So then, another thing, what happens, they have to miscode the check, right? And then, how do they convert the check? Because remember, once you have this check, now you have to convert it somehow. Okay. So, one of the things that a company can do, the employee can intercept a check intended for the third party, whatever it is, and then they try to tamper with the check somehow. They can either intercept them before delivery, okay? So, employees involved in delivering it, poor control of signed checks, this is another one, return checks, okay? And then converting the stolen check, cash checks where ID is not required. Now, like a check cashing store, okay, not too many places, but when you start dealing with company checks, people are going to get suspicious right away. Okay. Double endorsement of the check. Okay. So somebody signed the check over to you. So again, you could take a look here. This is the, one of these scheme things. Let me just make it a little bit bigger. So first thing, notice here. We'll just take a quick look here. Employee gets the check. Then somehow they have to tamper with the check. They have to change an address or something. They forge the endorsement. And then what happens? Can they do it without identification? Do they send it to another company? So again, if you stop and think, remember the whole thing about, well, if you think like a criminal or a fraudster, you'll be surprised how creative people can be. All right, let me bring this back down again. So again here, how do you prevent and detect? All right, prevent and detect. Here you go. We'll save. You can read all of this. You could assume all this. Internal. I see. That's the whole story. Separate functions. Separate functions. Train employees. Check out complaints. Duplicate payments. Check payables report. These are all different ways. And by the way, the bigger the organization, they have to keep this ongoing. Because money can disappear, and if you got a big account, it can disappear fast. Another one, what about altering payments? So they intercept a check and they alter who gets paid, okay, using a false name, okay. Could be erasable ink, could be blank checks. Again, erasable ink, I don't know. I haven't really seen that much of that, but there are some ways to do this, and I don't really know that I haven't seen too much. I haven't seen the blank checks, yes, erasable checks I haven't seen a lot of. Okay, and again, just a little here. This is, again, you look at the payee scheme, so you can go through and look at all this. These are just pathways that are potentially possible, right? And again, if you were investigating something like this, you would be taking a hard look. This would be a good kind of roadmap to how should you take a look at this, right? How would you try to determine what happened, okay? Preventing, again, we're here now, like I said before, this is kind of like audit. Now we're preventing and detecting alteration. Again, notice separate, put the pen back on, okay? Separate duty. Carbon checks, I think they're dreaming. I haven't seen these in ages. This is old. I haven't seen carbon checks in I can't even tell you how many years. I think since the 80s. Draft all checks in permanent ink. Well, that goes without saying. Okay. A little bit more. Now they're talking about concealed check. It says submit the fraudulent check with legitimate checks. Basically, you're trying to hide it. Trying to hide it in a pile. That could work, especially if somebody's not paying attention. Notice perpetrator is almost always the person responsible for preparing the checks, who has access, who's trusted, some authorized person not being attentive, and then give it to somebody when they're busy, so they're not really checking. I mean, I'm sure you've probably in your work history gone up to somebody you needed them to sign something, you just kind of stuck it in front of them, they didn't even read it and just signed it. There you go. That's how it happens. All right, concealed check scheme, I'm not going to go through that. You can read through there. It's just, different methodologies, how they would go through it. Now, what about authorized maker? In this case, the employee with the signature authority writes fraudulent checks. So now we have the authority. So now this is somebody fairly high up in a company, okay, who has signature authority. Their override controls, they have, again, poor controls. And again, what stops it? So, when you're getting asked questions about this, the whole thing is internal control. Internal control, internal control, internal control. Authorized maker scheme. Go ahead and take a moment to take a look through this. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to memorize that. But, like I said, a good pathway if you were looking to study this. Now, the next one, how do you conceal check tampering? Okay. Notice, most employees remain with the company as they continue to steal. They don't just steal. This is not one and done. Not one and done. They're usually there for a while, and they're going to keep picking the pocket. Okay. And again, they have to hide the identity of the criminal, hide the fact. They got to explain. So sometimes they're going to have to go through some juggling acts just to keep things going. But if they figured out a way to get in there, that's what's going to happen. All right, folks, that's part 3. We'll be back with part 4 in just a minute.